Hi, I'm Marcus Bean from Brompton Cookery School, and today I'm going to be showing you some fantastic recipes for our Health for Life Cookathon. What I'm going to start with some bread. Now, I absolutely love bread. Really easy and simple to do, and I'm going to show you a simple foolproof recipe. We're going to use some plain flour, 250 grams. Then we've got a little bit of salt, 5 grams of that into here, straight into our flour, okay? Mix that together into our flour so it all gets involved. And then the other thing we're going to do is we're going to use fresh yeast. Now, I'm a massive fan of fresh yeast. I think the flavour's much better. You don't get that harsh taste that you can get sometimes from dried yeast. Also, the only thing to remember on the recipe side of things is that fresh yeast is half as strong as dried yeast generally, okay? We're going to use this with some water. And we're going to add the yeast to the water. Now, another thing on the water, people always say use warm water or blood temperature, that sort of stuff. Again, warm water is fine, but you can use cold water in this. The only difference is that you're going to have a difference in temperature and it's going to take longer to prove. So if you wanted something to prove slightly quicker, a warmer water is slightly better. If it's colder, it's just going to take longer in the process. So we're going to add this fresh yeast, which if I can show you just briefly, looks a bit like sort of putty. Yeah, it's a bit like sort of dough really, I suppose. Interesting stuff, smells quite funny as well. So we're going to add that straight into our water. I'm going to use the end of my spoon just to give this a little stir, and what we want is our yeast to dissolve in our water. Really important, okay? And as the yeast dissolves, we're then going to add it into our flour and start to bring everything together. So give this a good stir. I think that's pretty much ready now. So now we can start to mix this into our bowl. Now I'm using a bowl for this, one because it keeps everything in the same place, keeps it a little bit tidier. You could, if you wanted, use a bag. I've seen people use little bags, like little Ziploc bags to put in before. Again, you could do that. Sometimes that can get a little bit messier, believe it or not, because you can't always work it as much, but it's an option. If not, bowl is your best thing, okay? Bring it all together. So I'm adding a little bit of time, just making sure I mix all that flour in. And then every little bit in here, even the bottom, in here where the yeast is at the bottom, there's a little bit stuck there, so I'm just going to give that a little stir around, and that's together. Now, using my spoon, giving it a good mix. And I'm using the spoon to start with because I want to try and get it combined before I get my hands in there, okay? So don't get too messy with my hands. Give it a good stir. And then when it starts to become a little bit sort of spread out and have dry spots in it, that's when I'm going to get my hands in. So just take a bit off this spatula. And then now I'm going to get my hand in there, okay? I'm going to start to just use my fingers just to start squashing it up together. I can sort of show you in here. Yeah, we're just giving it a bit of a squash together. And then everything in this bowl should go into our dough. So there shouldn't be anything left. Yeah, you shouldn't have a really messy bowl at the end of this. It should be nice and clean. So I'm just going to keep turning it over, keep squashing it with my hands. And you can see how clean that bowl is, yeah? That now is a mixture, you can see, it's quite nice and soft, it's come together quite well. It has a little bit of tackiness to it, and that's really important, that it is a little bit sticky. Not too much, okay? Because if you end up making your mix really, really dry, which is what a lot of people do with bread, when you come to bake it, it's going to be very, very dry. It's going to be very heavy. It's going to be a bit like a brick, yeah? You don't want that. We want something that's quite soft before it goes in. So we're now going to leave that in our bowl. I'm going to get a little bit of rapeseed oil or olive oil or something like that, a little splash in our bowl. Just going to rub that around the bowl. And I'm going to put our dough into here, and then I'm just going to cover that. And you could cover this with a bag. Sometimes if I've got a bigger amount of dough, I might put it into a black bin line, just wrap it over. Use a little bit of cling film, or we could use a damp tea towel, yeah. The main thing we want to do is stop the air getting inside the dough, because if it gets on top of the dough while it's proving, it's going to form a crust, and then when you come to knock that the dough back together, you're going to be pushing the crust inside the bread, and it's going to taste pretty horrible. So we'll leave that for about an hour and come back to it, and then we'll start again. So the next thing I'm going to cook for you now is going to be our harvest vegetable soup. So I've got some great ingredients I'm going to talk through. Now, we grow quite a lot of the stuff at our cookery school. We have things in the garden. So this time of the year, it doesn't matter if some of these vegetables aren't around, or you can get other alternatives. You can always adapt and change these. So my favourite thing, starting off, carrots. Then we've got a delicious sweet potato, really full of flavour, absolutely fantastic. Another ingredient we love and we use in all of our courses is onion. Absolutely fantastic and packed full of flavour, so it always goes in everything. Delicious garlic, So tasty and so good for you. Celery, really, really good. Also full of water, which is great. Celeriac, absolutely tasty, cooked all raw. Some fresh thyme, really delicious. And then a little bit of good quality salt. And then now we're going to start preparing the vegetables. And what I'm trying to do with most of these ingredients is get them to a similar size, so when they cook in the pan, they cook at the same rate. I'm going to grab my dough, which has been proving for a little bit over here. I'm going to bring this back, take the top off, and just have a little look at this, and you can see that it's risen, so you get this real nice spongy texture in it. I'm just going to take this out of the bowl, and I'm actually going to move my board out of the way just so I can work straight onto the surface. If you are working on a wooden top or something like that, you might need just a little dusting of flour, but try not to have too much flour because we don't want to dry out the dough. Okay. Take this out of the bowl, and you can see now how lovely and stretchy it is, yeah? Really, really good. So I'm now going to just start to knead this a little bit on the surface. So I'm going to pop it onto the surface, just using my hands. I'm using this part of our hand here, and we're just going to push it out. And what you're doing is just stretching that dough, okay? Stretch that dough as much as possible, okay? And at this point, it shouldn't be too sticky now. I mean, it's got a little bit of stickiness on my hand here, but actually, it's only just very gently tacky. It's not too bad, which is obviously was a lot stickier earlier. So I'm trying to do this quite quickly, because if you don't do this very quickly and you keep your hand on it too much, it can tend to stick to your hands. So we're always constantly moving our hands, rotating it, keeping it as quick as possible. So we want to do this for a minute or two, I'd say, probably, not too long, just to get this dough a bit smoother. And you'll notice how the dough will change the more we work this, yeah? How it will be lovely and soft and smooth in terms of its consistency, and that's what we're looking for, okay? Already it has changed, and it's a nice smooth, see how lovely and smooth that is as a dough. Really lovely, nice and soft, very delicate, yeah? And that's what we want now. So we're just going to leave that to sit and prove a little bit longer, probably another half an hour or so. So straight back into the same bowl, cling film back over, yeah, and then set on the side for a little bit longer. So now we've got our bread out of the way, and that's proving again. We're going to come over to our soup. First thing we're going to do is we need a little bit of rapeseed oil, which we're going to pop into the bottom of our pan, and that's just going to stop everything sticking. Then we're going to add into there our onions, our garlic, and our celery, okay? The first three things that are going to go into the base of our soup. So they all go in that pan. Look at them. We're going to give those a good stir together and allow them to start to come together. So essentially all we're trying to do is just sweat that onion down just a little bit to cook with the celeriac and the garlic and get all those flavours starting to work together. So just about 2 minutes on the heat before we then add our vegetables. So now those are cooked down for a couple of minutes, we're going to start to add our vegetables. And you can add them all at once, so I'm just going to do them in little piles just to get them across the pan. So we've got our carrots going in, and we've got our sweet potato. And you've got all these amazing colours that are all going in this soup. Then our celeriac. Then we pop these into the pan, allow them to come together. We want that onion, garlic and celery to start to coat those root vegetables and just cook in that pan before we start to add our stock. So now the vegetables have had a couple of minutes just to marry together with all that lovely onion and garlic and celery. We're now going to add a couple of other things. The first thing is going to be some of this thyme, the fresh thyme that we've got from the garden. We're just going to put a few little loose sprigs in here, and I'm also going to put the whole piece in as well, just to infuse the flavour. Then we're going to go in with the stock, okay? Put all that stock in over those vegetables. And what you want to do is just make sure you're covering those vegetables with that stock. And then we're going to bring this to boil, and we're going to simmer this for around about 20 minutes until those vegetables are lovely and soft, okay? And at that point, then we can blitz them, and then we'll taste it for seasoning, and it'll be ready for serving. So now our bread's proved a little bit more, we're going to take it out and we're going to shape it ready to bake in the oven. So I'm just going to get my cover off the bowl, remove the dough, and you'll see now that the dough, again, it's quite lovely and aerated, yeah, really nice and soft. Yeah, I'm gonna now just push this down my fingers just to get some of that air out of it, and I'm gonna fold it over and just tuck it back in and get a nice round shape on this, okay? Now, I'm gonna serve these into 3 little molds, yeah? Now you can use absolutely anything. We could just simply roll it into a sort of baguette style like that. We could cut it down into a few little rolls if you wanted, entirely up to you. But if you've got some little pots like this or flower pots, anything like that would work, and we can use those to bake, okay? So if you were doing this into a little roll, I'd probably split this down into about 3. So roughly measure these out. And if I was doing this as a roll, what we'd do is just put a hand on top of it as like a little cage, and we just move that together, and then you end up with a little roll, okay? We're then gonna put that roll into our mold here and let it proof for a little bit. So we're gonna do exactly the same with this one. Yeah, there's the other one, and the same on this one. You just bring this together. If you wanted to do some smaller ones, again, you could break them into 4s or even tiny little rolls. We just need to change the cooking time slightly. And again, they're done. So we've got our 3 ones here. I'm gonna serve them into these little molds. So I'm gonna get some little touch of oil and put a splash of oil in each one of these molds to stop the dough sticking, all right? So get your fingers in there, give it a little rub around all around the edges. Exactly the same on the other sides, okay? All up the edges, all around the sides. And this is just gonna allow our dough to stop sticking to our molds. And then with that nice round mix, we're gonna put that straight into our pot. And the same on this one. Okay, I'm going to lift one up to show you so you can see how it sits there. And if we leave that for around about 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, something like that, what you'll find is that it'll just start to lift up a little bit. And then when it goes into the oven, it's going to prove and it's going to come right over the edge. So generally looking at the dough being about half the size of our mold, and then that's going to create over and create a lovely little top on here when it rises, okay? So you can see our bread now has had 15 minutes after it's been shaped, proved just in our tins here. And you can see it's risen, the difference in size to what it was before. And now this is perfect, ready to go in the oven and cook, but needs to go on a nice high heat in the oven. So around about 210 degrees, if not a little bit more. And this is going to cook for around about 15 to 20 minutes. So I'm going to pop it on a baking tray and get these in the oven. And then we'll check them in 20 minutes and they'll be perfect to serve with our harvest vegetable soup. So now we've got our bread out of the way, we're going to come over to our soup. So this has been cooking down for at least 20 minutes now, and all those flavours have started to come together. It smells absolutely delicious in the kitchen, but the thing we need to check is whether those veggies are cooked. Now the sweet potatoes and the celeriac will cook much quicker. They're generally a softer vegetable. So the thing we need to check is just the carrots. So I've got one of these carrots out, I'm just going to have a little look. Just check, and you can check this just by touching it with a knife or poking it and see if it's okay, or just have a little taste. Perfectly soft, delicious. Oh, it's so tasty as well. So now all I'm going to do is take that across and get that blended. After we've blended it, that's when we're going to season it and get it ready and finish it for tasting. Okay, so we've blitzed up our soup. Now we're just going to check the consistency and also check the seasoning. So if the soup is a little bit thick, you can just let it down with a touch of water. All you need to do is put some cold water in there and just blend it just to get it to the right consistency. You're much better having the soup thicker because then you can let it down rather than it being thinner and trying to thicken it up. I'm going to check this. You can see that to me is perfect. You've got a really lovely texture to that. Needs a little touch of seasoning. So we'll add a little bit of salt in there, give that a stir together, and then now that's ready for us to serve. So I'm just going to grab a bowl. And again, this should serve easily 4 portions. So do a nice portion in here. A little touch more. And then, can't forget, bread. Just gonna get that out of the oven. Got that ready. Just while that bread's cooling for a minute, I'm just gonna garnish my soup with a little bit of fresh cream. But again, you could pop a little bit of yogurt on top, anything like that. And sometimes just a little pinch of black pepper, just to garnish. And then one of our bread rolls should just, look at that, and you can see that bread roll, so you've got all that lovely colour, perfect inside. And then we're going to just have that on the side, ready to go with the bread. And that's our harvest soup and lovely white bread roll. Thanks for watching my recipes, and good luck with the Health for Life Cookathon.